Pleasure for me to introduce Alison Smith, who for many years have been coordinating the activities on international criminal law for No Peace Without Justice, an organization that I had the pleasure to coordinate within the UN system 20 years ago. And she will speak about the implication of international criminal law and what we've been hearing since 1 p.m. today. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marco. And thank you to the organizers of this event, David in particular, and thank you to all of you for being here. As Marco mentioned, what I wanted to talk about was an international criminal law framework of what's been happening in the Philippines. At No Peace Without Justice, we've been researching this for the past several months, looking at what's been happening on the basis of open source information, so media reports and things like that. And the reason we wanted to look at this within an international legal framework is because if certain crimes are committed, this triggers certain obligations on the part of the state. Now, as was mentioned, the Philippines has ratified the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court. And so the Rome Statute's substantive international criminal law is the framework that we've been using to look at what's been happening, because that's the applicable law in the Philippines at the relevant times. So the Rome Statute covers war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. In terms of war crimes, there's no armed conflict, so there's no war crimes. We can't see any specific intent to destroy a protected group in whole or in part, so there's no genocide. So we've been focusing on crimes against humanity. The definition of crimes against humanity is any one of a number of prohibited acts when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population as part of a state or organizational policy to carry out that attack. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail, also so we can fit in what we've been hearing and what we will hear from Chair Gascon about the facts on the ground within this legal framework. Starting with the prohibited acts, the first act that's prohibited in crimes against humanity is the act of murder. And what this means is basically a killing that is not justified by law. And from what we've seen from the videos and what we've seen happening in the Philippines, there are many, many killings that are taking place that do not appear to be justified by law. So we have the prohibited act taking place in the Philippines. In terms of the context, as I mentioned, the context is that the act takes place as part of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population as pursuant to a state or organizational policy to commit the attack. And I'm just going to focus on two of those elements, but I'm happy to answer questions about the other elements as well if anybody wishes to ask. The first element I wanted to highlight is the question of the attack. When international criminal law is talking about an attack as part of crimes against humanity, it doesn't mean a military attack necessarily. What it's referring to is forgive the technical language here, the commission of multiple acts that are prohibited within the context of crimes against humanity. So we can see there is an attack in the Philippines that's constituted by this very large number of extrajudicial killings that has been taking place since May 2016. The second element I wanted to focus on was the question of a state or organizational policy or plan. One thing I would say, this is not part of customary international law, but it is part of the Rome Statute system, so it is an element that would need to be satisfied in the case of the Philippines. And the purpose of this is to distinguish random attacks from the widespread or systematic attacks required for crimes against humanity. The thing I wanted to mention about this is that there's no need under international law for there to be a formal plan, a written plan, or a written policy, and that a policy or plan can be inferred from the circumstances, so by the systematic nature of what's happening, or by, for example, promises that perpetrators will be protected and will be shielded from the law. And all of these things can point to the existence of a plan or policy. And our conclusions based on the research that we've done is that there is a state policy either to carry out the attack or at least to look the other way and to allow these attacks to take place. So based on our research, our conclusions are that there have been crimes against humanity being committed in the Philippines since May 2016. And this triggers certain obligations. And the obligations it triggers is on the Philippine authorities to investigate and, where appropriate, to prosecute people who are perpetrating these crimes against humanity. And as David mentioned, we recognise the presence of the Philippines here, and we look forward to your thoughts and input on that. So our recommendations, of course, are first that these killings should stop, and second, that the Philippines should investigate and prosecute the crimes that have been committed, and so to contribute to accountability and contribute to a Philippines based on human rights and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison.